Professor Sterling didn't bottle the sample like Elias suggested. Instead, he did something much worse. Driven by a cocktail of desperation and a bruised ego, Sterling spent the next 72 hours locked in that lab, trying to reverse engineer Elias's math. He saw a path to redemption, a way to claim the violet synthesis as his own discovery, framed as a collaborative breakthrough between him and his student. He thought he could bury the humiliation under a Nobel-worthy publication, but the academic world in 2026 doesn't move as slowly as it used to. While Sterling was scrubbing the chalkboard, a video taken by a student in the front row was already tearing through the scientific community. It had 4 million views before the sun even went down. The caption was simple: "The moment a legend was born and a fraud was exposed." By Monday morning, the university board wasn't calling Sterling to congratulate him. They were calling him to an emergency hearing. The Apex 99 reveal hadn't just hurt Sterling's feelings. It had flagged a massive ethical violation. If Sterling had intentionally blocked and ignored a peer review correction from a student just to protect his own flawed data, his entire career was a house of cards. Meanwhile, Elias Vance was no longer the kid in the worn backpack. He was sitting in a high-rise office in downtown Chicago, looking out at the skyline. Opposite him sat the CEO of Omni-Chem, one of the largest sustainable energy firms in the world. They didn't care about his grades or his pedigree. They had seen the violet vapor. They knew that Elias hadn't just solved a lab experiment. He had unlocked the key to high-density hydrogen storage, a problem that had stumped the world's best engineers for a decade. "We'll give you your own lab, Elias," the CEO said, pushing a contract across the table. "Full autonomy, a $10 million research budget. The only condition? You finish what you started in that classroom." Elias looked at the contract, then back at the city. He thought about the basement library. He thought about his mother working 2 jobs to keep him in school. He picked up the pen, and he signed. 6 months later, the impossible happened. An industrial chemical plant on the outskirts of the city, a plant where Professor Sterling served as the chief consultant, suffered a catastrophic cooling failure. A massive tank of volatile polymer was undergoing a runaway exothermic reaction. If it hit critical mass, the explosion would level 3 city blocks. The emergency systems were failing. The standard inhibitors weren't working. In the command center, Sterling was a ghost of his former self. His hands shook as he stared at the monitors. His flawless math had failed in the real world. The pressure was climbing. The red lights were flashing. "We have to evacuate," Sterling whispered, his voice trembling with the weight of thousands of lives. "It's too late. The equilibrium is gone." "Not yet," a voice crackled over the intercom. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the gates. Elias Vance stepped out, wearing a sleek charcoal gray lab coat with the Omni-Chem logo on the chest. He didn't wait for permission. He walked straight into the command center, his eyes scanning the pressure gauges with that same predatory precision he had shown in Lab 402. The room went silent. Sterling looked up, his eyes wide with a mix of shame and terror. "Elias, you shouldn't be here. It's going to blow." Elias didn't even look at him. He shoved Sterling aside and began typing commands into the main override console. "You used the old solvent ratios again, didn't you? You forgot that at this scale, the heat sink isn't passive." I thought the pressure would stabilize," Sterling stammered. "Science doesn't care what you think, Professor," Elias snapped. "It only cares about what's true." Elias initiated a reverse injection of the violet catalyst he had spent months perfecting. On the monitors, the soaring red line of the temperature graph suddenly jerked. It hit the peak, and then it began to plunge. The pressure hissed out of the safety valves. The sirens died down. The green lights flickered back to life. Elias stood back from the console, his breathing steady. The plant was safe. The disaster had been averted in less than 90 seconds. The engineers in the room erupted into cheers, hugging each other, crying with relief. But Sterling just stood there, staring at the screen. He realized that Elias hadn't just saved the city, he had saved him. "Why?" Sterling asked, his voice barely a whisper. "After everything I did to you, after I tried to bury your name, why did you—" Elias grabbed his gear and walked toward the exit. He stopped at the door and looked back one last time. "Because the science was broken, Professor, and I don't leave problems unsolved. But don't mistake my help for forgiveness. You were so busy being a gatekeeper that you forgot how to be a student. And in this world, the moment you stop learning, you become a danger to everyone around you." Sterling watched him go, knowing that his time in the sun was over. He was a relic of the past. Elias was the future. Elias Vance didn't just become a billionaire or a world-renowned chemist. He became a symbol. He showed the world that brilliance doesn't wait for an invitation. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't matter if they block your messages or ignore your talent or try to rig the game against you. If you are the best, the world will eventually have to come to your door. The violet vapor wasn't a fluke. It was a message. The next time you see someone who doesn't fit the mold, or someone from a place you've been told produces nothing of value, look again, because they might just be the one holding the solution to the problem you can't solve. Stay humble, stay hungry, and never, ever let someone else's ego define your potential. Because the only thing more powerful than a chemical reaction is the human spirit when it's finally set free.